I have no idea how to start this video. This is probably in what, 14, 15 years I've been here on YouTube. This is really hard, this video. And don't get alarmed. Don't get alarmed, but it's hard because I've debated a lot about whether or not to even share this with you. And I decided that I would finally, but also I heavily debated how to tell you what I really think I should tell you. So many of you have been a part of my life for so long that you deserve to know what's going on sometimes. I don't always share my real personal things. You know, a lot of creators do, and I know many of you like that. But I also know that many of you are here for makeup, and I appreciate that too. But I think when we've been here, and for as long as we have been, and we have this relationship, I do owe it to you. And it's a long story, and it's a very, very scary story. I've thought about going through every single little detail and telling you what's happened, but I think I'm just going to speak off the top of my head, and I may take a little sidetrack here or there, but bear with me. And it's actually in two parts, and I'm going to do both parts. But the second part is the worst part, and it's heavily connected to the first part. So I know I've kept you in suspense. You're going, Patty, just shut up and tell us what's going on. All right. I've been in the hospital for a week. It has been the craziest week of my life. Bar none. I don't care what's happened to me in my life. The bad, the good, the ugly, the scary, the whatever. It's been the worst week of my life. And I'll start with part one. And because I know some of you are new and you really don't know me, and even some of you who have been with me for a long time may not know this, but I think a couple of things I've shared with you probably in the early years, but haven't talked about it in a long time. But one thing about, I'm healthy. I'm just a healthy person. You know, I think I do things pretty okay and take care of myself, but I would consider myself healthy. But when I was 30, I had my first kidney stone, or I passed my first kidney stone. And since then, I have been a huge kidney stone producer. I've learned this week something I did not know. I thought I knew everything, but they can be caused by genetics. Not only your diet, but genetics. My kidney stones have been tested, and they're the calcium oxalate. They're, you know, it's eating green leafy vegetables, eating spinach, those types of things, beets, those types of things, oxates. So, and I have, to my knowledge, no one in my family has ever passed a kidney stone other than me that I've heard of. So anyway, I've passed so many over the years that I can't tell you how many. I've had the teeniest ones, you know, the average size kidney stone is, I think, about smaller than a grain of rice. And then there are smaller ones, and then there are bigger ones. So I've passed all sizes. And I've had lithotripsy twice over the years. And lithotripsy is where they go in with sonic waves or laser now, but usually sonic waves, and they blast and then you just pee them out. So I had that twice. I had that the second time 20 years ago. And it's been wild. And it's been wild because for the past 20 years, I haven't passed a kidney stone. And as a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, Jim's older son passed one. And I remember us talking about it then, how lucky I've been that I haven't passed one. So I've experienced, I know how that stone feels sometimes when it pops out of your kidney into your urethra. I know how it feels. Sometimes I've passed kidney stones that they were a few inches down my urethra before I ever felt the real first pain because they were so teeny. And then I had one 20 years ago that was the size of a quarter. So, we actually talked about the fact that I'd gone this long without passing one. So I have my calendar because I want to tell you dates, because dates are sort of important here in this story. There's a sequence of events that happened that led to the second part. And the second part, again, is what's so scary, so very scary. But you have to know the first part to hear the second part, or to understand what's going on in the second part. Let me put it that way. But, so I can tell you exactly. So, at 2:30 Sunday morning, I'm looking at my calendar, on July the 12th, 2:30 in the morning, I woke up with this pain. And it was in my lower left abdomen. And, I knew. I knew it was a kidney stone. It was probably about 4 or 5 inches from my bladder. I could feel it, and it was moving, and it was hurting. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say it was a good 5 or 6. And if you've ever had one, or if you know anyone who has, you know. It's one of those, if you know, you know. So it was 2:30 in the morning. Normally, if this had happened to me, and if I were feeling the pain further up my back, closer to my kidney, or in the flank, I would have had Jim up and we would be on our way to the emergency room. But this stone was moving and it was hurting. And I laid there for a minute and I thought, okay, let's think about this. And so I thought, I'll get up, I'll get some clothes on, Jim will get up. We'll have to do a couple of little things around the house, secure a biscuit, get the hospital. It's about 15 minutes away. And at the rate this thing is moving, by the time I get to the hospital, I'm probably going to have passed it. So I made the decision not to wake Jim and just to let him sleep. And I laid there in agony for probably an hour. And I even took my hands, and I reached down and I massaged in that area above my bladder, hoping that maybe I could hurry that stone along a little bit. And I knew that it had to be one of those itsy bitsy tiny ones because I had not felt it. I didn't feel it when it came out of my kidney. I didn't feel it as it was moving down the urethra. So sure enough, it stopped hurting. And I had to pee. So I got up and went and peed, and I'm quite sure I passed that stone. I didn't feel it. I'm quite sure I did. So I went to sleep. And we got up, and I told Jim what had happened. And he, of course, Jim just sort of shook his head. Why didn't you wake me? Blah, blah, blah. I said, well, it's all over with. And I thought, boy, if that was it, I can handle that, Everything's good. Felt great. Went on about my business. It was like it never happened. It's Monday morning. Now that was Sunday the 12th. Monday morning, the 20th, I got up as usual. I was piddling around the house, had a little breakfast, and I was walking through the living room, and I felt like I had been shot in the back. It was almost like I saw stars. It was like pow, like that. I mean, just pow, right in the middle of my back. And I went, oh, I knew. That was a feeling I had never felt before when the stone moved from my kidney into the urethra. Kidney stones don't hurt when they're in your kidney. No pain whatsoever. You just don't know they're there unless you've had some reason to have a CT scan or a MRI, and you know they're there. So, and I hadn't. I knew. I knew exactly what it had to be. And I walked over and I sat down in my chair. Jim came through the living room, and I'm in pain. I'm in major pain. And on a scale of 0 to 10, it was a good solid 9. Jim walked through and he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "A kidney stone." And he said, "Are we going to the ER?" And I said, "We're going." And we got up, and, I threw on some clothes. He got dressed. We got Biscuit taken care of. We left, and we drove straight to the ER. And when we got to the ER, again, it's one of those things, if you don't know, you don't know. If you don't know, good for you. I'm so happy for you. But I was bent double. Jim pulled up at the entrance to the ER, and he got out, and he helped me out, and there was a bench there, and I sat down on the bench, and he said, "Let me park as quick as I can, and I'll be right back." And so it didn't take him but just a minute. It was early, and the emergency area wasn't outside that busy at the time. So while I was sitting on the bench waiting for him, I started having cold chills in addition to the pain. And I started feeling some shortness of breath. And I think I was having a panic attack. And I told him when he got there. And so he got me inside, and of course the desk was right there, and we gave her the information and told her what was going on. And I said, and Jim said, and she's, really short of breath or having a panic attack. And the lady grabbed a wheelchair, and she called someone, and they came and got me, and they did a EKG, EEG, to see if I was having a heart attack. And they did that and determined immediately that I was not. That, it was probably a panic attack. But, so then you go through that whole process when you go into the emergency room like that, where you have to, it's a sit and wait, and there were a lot of people in there waiting too for various things. And one of the things when you have a kidney stone is you have to give them you have to do a urine sample, and they have to, that sort of tells them too if there's something going on. And it took forever for me to be able to do that. I just couldn't. And I'm in pain with nothing. I'm a 9, and they're giving me nothing. We're there for a couple of hours, and I'm in pain. And finally, I managed to go in the ladies' room and get a couple of drops. And they tested it, and they came and got me and said, "Come on back." And they put me in a room, and they immediately put an IV in my arm and started just shooting fluids in me. We knew, and I knew enough to know that the stone was not progressing. At that point, I knew from the pain, where the pain was, that it was probably no more than an inch out of my kidney. And normally it would have been a lot further than that down the urethra. But so it was just there. And they're wanting it to move. So they're giving me all these fluids. I mean, massive amounts of fluids to try to get it to move. They immediately also started giving me morphine, which is every time I've ever passed a kidney stone, they've given me morphine for the pain, and it's always, always taken care of the pain. It didn't touch it. Didn't touch it. So they started trying to find a narcotic that would help me. And they finally, and I'm not going to say what they were, but they finally combined two that worked and took care of the pain. But we're hours into it by now, and I'm being shot full of fluids, trying to get it to move. It's not moving. They send me for a CT scan. And when the CT scan showed that it was, in fact, where we thought it was, and it was lodged, it was too big to pass. It was, I think, 6.5 millimeters. Well, I know 6.5 millimeters. It was blocking my urethra completely. I couldn't, no urine could pass from my kidney to my bladder. Now remember, they're giving me all these fluids to try to get it to move. So they, within just probably 30 or 40 minutes, I had a urologist in the room, and they were rolling me into surgery. And what they did is they put a stent in that goes from my kidney to my bladder, and it does two things. It opens up the urethra so that urine can flow through to my bladder, and it also tries to hold that stone in place. It looks like a thin wire is what it looks like, with curlicues on the ends. So I was told that I would keep that for probably 2 or 3 weeks, and I'll go back and have outpatient surgery, and they will remove it, and they will then probably laser that stone to blast it, to break it up into small particles so that I could just pee it out. So they kept me overnight. I also developed a severe UTI infection from this, and I am also, and they mentioned, the doctor mentioned sepsis. They had to be so careful that this didn't develop into sepsis. And when he said that, I think Jim came up out of his chair. But I am highly allergic to 2 different antibiotics that they usually use for UTIs. I can't tell you the last time I had one. But so they had to try different antibiotics to find one that would grow the Ebola. And evidently that happened super fast to know that it would work on this infection. So they found something that I could take that would work on that infection, and were giving me massive doses of that. So I spent the night in the hospital. They released me Tuesday morning. That would have been Tuesday the 21st. And we come home. They send me home with a narcotic just for pain, just in case that stone somehow dislodged, because it's still trying to move. It's trying to roll around in there, but it can't. But it's trying, and in case it started doing that again, I would have something for pain. And of course, they gave me the antibiotic, and just rest today, you'll be fine. Call the office, schedule the procedure to have all this done. So that's how we came home. Came home fine. I came home from the hospital. Listen, I felt good. I piddled around here. I did all the things you do, and I'm good, and just making plans. Wednesday all day was fine. Didn't get out of the house. Jim is real protective, and he says, we're just going to stay home. We're just going to stay home. We stayed home all day. I just laid around, didn't do anything, felt perfectly okay. No problem whatsoever. I'm good to go. I go to bed Wednesday night. Now, one of the antibiotic that I'm taking, I take an overnight dose at 1 o'clock in the morning. So I had my alarm set. We go to bed, Jim goes to sleep. I start tossing and turning, and I can't sleep. I can't breathe. I lay down to sleep like I normally do. I can't breathe. I'm literally gasping for breath. And this goes on for 3 or 4 hours. And I can't breathe, and I can't breathe. It's not horrible, but I can't breathe. I know I can't breathe. You know, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what it was. And my alarm went off at 1 o'clock. And I took the antibiotic. I didn't wake Jim. And I thought, okay, I think I'm going to prop my pillows against the headboard and just lean against the headboard and see if I can go to sleep sitting up, see if I could breathe sitting up. And when I did, I could. I mean, it immediately relieved it when I sat there for a minute or so. And I literally slept the rest of the night sitting up against the headboard of our bed. And when I got up Thursday morning, we got up about the same time, and I told Jim what had happened, and it really concerned him that I didn't wake him up. But I really didn't know what was going on. I didn't want to scare him. But I walked around a little bit, and all of a sudden it hit me. And I was gasping for breath. I was upright, but I was gasping. And I sat down in my chair, and I told Jim what was happening. And he said, I'm calling an ambulance. And he called the ambulance. And part 2. You might want to pause the video, get a tea or a soft drink or coffee, or stretch your arms. As soon as the ambulance got here, and they got here relatively fast, this is probably 8 o'clock Thursday morning. They got here and they immediately put oxygen on me, and they did an IV and got me to the ER. First time I've ever ridden in an ambulance. And when we got into the hospital, and I'm going to tell you something, this is the new Baptist hospital in Pensacola, and it has only been open a couple of years, and it is state of the art. And I'm probably going to do a video on that hospital. I would love to do some work for that hospital because of my experience at that hospital. I may contact them. I don't know, but I'm telling you, this was like nothing I've ever seen in my life. But I'm in the emergency room, and it's a young nurse, probably in her mid to late 20s, a female. It was 2 young men who look like they had just popped off of the cover of a romance novel. The hair, the hard bodies, about her age. And when I tell you, and we've all, maybe you've experienced it firsthand. I haven't, but it was like what you see in the movies or on a TV show where you're in the ER and it's everybody converging on you and doing different things to you at once, you know, trying to fix whatever it is that's wrong. And I'll show you this because it was at that moment that I was relegated to this wristband. You see the barcode? I was relegated to a barcode. Jim and I are trying to tell them that, of course, they immediately had me on oxygen too, and we're trying to tell them what had happened about the kidney stone. And they're going, okay, like that. And she said, and I'm starting to feel, again, nauseous and breaking out in a cold sweat. The female nurse said, have you eaten today? And I said, I think I took a couple of swallows of a Diet Coke and that's it. And she went, oh. And she ran out of the room, and right across the hall was the, there's supply room, I guess. And she ran in there real quick and she darted back in, and she had the glucose monitor and the little strips and the little pricky thing, and she pricked my finger, and she said, "Oh my gosh, it's 44." And of course, I have no idea what she was talking about. And she flew out of that room, and she came back in, and she had this huge big syringe, and she starts, and they had, by the way, put another IV in by then, and she started pushing that sugar, as she called it, into my vein, into the IV, and finally one of the young men grabbed it and he said, "Let me do that." He's shoving it in. And she walked over and she pricked my finger again, and she said, "Oh no, now it's almost 1,000." And then they had to get it lower, and they pretty immediately got it down to normal. And she's going, "Are you diabetic? Are you diabetic?" And I said, "No, I'm not diabetic." And Jim is going, "No, she's not diabetic." And so it continues. And they're just giving me oxygen. They're trying to do everything they can do to figure out what's going on with me. It is pure panic. I was sure I was dying. When you can't breathe, and I know many of you know that feeling. The door to that little examining room opened. If I get through this without crying, I'm going to be doing good. The door opened, and this tall man walked in. And when he opened his mouth, he had an accent. We found out later he was Australian. And he said, "Miss Bailey, Mr. Bailey, I'm doctor. I am a hospital doctor." And evidently this is something new that some of these hospitals are doing now. They have their own staff of doctors who can treat you if you don't have a doctor. I had doctors, but this was an emergency, a true emergency. And he was there. And he said, he took my hand and he said, and he looked at Jim and he said, "I want the two of you to listen to what I'm getting ready to tell you. And I'm not going to go into all this anatomy and why this happened this way and this. He said, I'm gonna make this as plain and clear and easy to understand. And I want you to listen to what I'm going to say." But he said, what this was, he said, and I know you've heard it before, you've heard of a perfect storm. And he said, this is a perfect storm. He said, so first of all, I want to tell you something. He said, but let me tell you this. And I'm not doing this, certainly not verbatim or even anywhere close, but this is what he said, basically, he said, first of all, I know that you see Dr. So-and-so, he's your cardiologist, and I know that you just saw him on July 1st for your annual visit, and I know everything was just fine. No issues whatsoever, And he said, and I know him too because he's one of my best buddies. And we went to LSU together. And he said, so I'm telling you, I know what I'm talking about. And he said, from this point on, you didn't have a kidney stone. You just forget that. That'll handle itself. He said, while you're in this hospital, everything you hear, everything that is done to you will look like you're in congestive heart failure. He said, you're not. You do not have it. You're not in it. A side note, my mother died when she was 82 of congestive heart failure. I was going to be 83 Monday the 27th, yesterday. But he said, you don't have it. And he said, your lungs, he said, here's what happened. He said, when you came in with that kidney stone, because of the nature of it and that it was stuck and we had to do all this other, they were trying to get that stone to move and they were pumping you so full of fluids that they basically overflowed you and your lungs filled up. He said the level of fluid in your lungs changes, which makes sense whether you're sitting up or standing down, if you have any at all, or any bodily fluids, I guess, for that matter. But he said, you had this fluid, it had nowhere to go. Your urethra was blocked for a period of time. There was nowhere for all of these fluids to go. And so he said, we've got to get rid of those fluids. And that's what this is going to be about, is getting rid of those fluids. And he said, but if you walked into this hospital this morning and that kidney stone had never happened and you had these symptoms, you would be diagnosed with congestive heart failure and probably dying. And that's why there was such a panic about figuring out what was going on. But he said, you don't have it, he said, everybody's going to talk to you in those terms. They're going to assume that you think you have it, but you don't. And he said, you got to keep that in the back of your mind or you will go crazy. He said, now, I will tell you this. I have read your echocardiogram, which I had had the year before, exactly 1 year ago. He said, I have read that thoroughly. He said, I'm going to order a new one that will be done probably later today just to confirm that. But he said, let me tell you about your heart. He said, you're 82 years old. You have an 82-year-old heart. He said, 82-year-old hearts get a little stiff. They all do. Your heart is a little stiff. He said, but for an 82-year-old woman, your heart is really, really strong. And he said, I'm certain that an echocardiogram will confirm that. And of course, we did find out later that he said that there was virtually no change from last year to this year. So, but from that point on, they had put this band on me, and it has a barcode. And this had, this hospital, every single time someone walked in that room, I don't care who it was, anybody connected to that hospital, which would be anybody but Jim, he was the only other person. When they walked through the door, they said, I need your name and I need your date of birth. If I said Patti Bailey, 7/27/43, one time, I'm quite sure I said it probably 500 times. That's exaggerating. But a lot. It was many, many, many times a day. Then they would walk over to my bed. They had this little sensor, handheld sensor, and they would put it up to my band and they would scan the barcode. They had a computer. There was a computer in every room. Everything was done like that. Everything. They came in to do my vitals. The girl, and she had the instrument on the stand there, and it would take my blood pressure, and it would show up on that screen, and she would look at me and she'd say, your blood pressure is, and she would repeat it. Or she would say it, and then she would say, your blood oxygen level is, your temperature is. And then she would say, do you have any questions? You know, super nice, super nice. So I spent, that was Thursday, had another CT scan of my chest that confirmed all of the fluid in my chest. They pretty much, after they got me to the room, they started weighing me. They brought a scale in, and they were weighing me. And that's something else that was really funny I'm someone, and I think I've mentioned this before when we've talked about losing weight and whatnot. I weigh myself every morning. The first thing I do when I get out of bed is I go to the bathroom, I pee, and I stand on the scale immediately and see what I weigh. And my weight is always very consistent, very consistent. And so that morning, before I went for the kidney stone trip, I had weighed myself, and I knew exactly what I weighed. And that was Monday morning. When I came home Tuesday morning or Tuesday afternoon from the kidney stone incident, I went in to pee, and I thought, I think I'm going to weigh. And I stood on the scale, and I was 7 pounds heavier in a day. Jim was sitting in his chair, and I walked in, and I said, you don't want to hear something funny? And he said, sure. I said, how does one weigh one morning and weigh one thing and go to the ER, come back the next afternoon and weigh 7 pounds more? And he sort of laughed. He said, beats me. And we didn't think any more about it. So they were weighing me. And what they were doing for treatment is they were giving me Lasix through the IV in massive amounts. And I spend most of my time in the bathroom, as you can imagine. But they're weighing me every so often, watching. And by the time I left the hospital late Sunday afternoon, I weighed 1 pound less than I weighed the Monday morning that I went in for the kidney stone. So I lost a pound. But I came home with no medication. I came home with just feeling a little exhausted, a little rough for the wear. It's weird how things happen so fast. Right off the bat, the second go around, of course, Jim called Jennifer when he was on the way to the hospital following the ambulance and told her what was going on. And so pretty much, after they got me in there, he's on the phone with her again. And she made me take the phone. And every time I talked to her, she would say, turn on FaceTime. I want to see your face. I want to see your face. Every time we talked, I want to see your face. And she and Jim, they were the best advocates, and she kept saying, I'll get in the car, I can drive down there. It's about an 8-hour drive. She said, I can be there faster than I can fly there for sure, but I can get in the car and leave right now. And I didn't want her here. We didn't know. At that point, I didn't know what to do, but I didn't want to. I'm trying not to scare her. I'm trying to remember what this Australian doctor had told me. It was scary. It was scary. Came home Sunday afternoon late. Jim made me a little dinner. I have no appetite whatsoever. And I slept Sunday night, and yesterday, Monday, July 27th, 2026, I woke up and it was my 83rd birthday. And I woke up before Jim did, and I do what I usually do. I came in and I sat in my chair, get my phone, and this popped up on my phone screen. July 27th, 2026. I read this to Jennifer and I cried. I and I think I'm going to cry again. July 27th, 2026. The universe is saying to you today, trust does not require all the answers. It only requires the willingness to take the next step. Get ready to move forward with greater peace. What is meant for you is already finding its way to you. Trust does not require all the answers. Faith. I mean, I sat there really for a long time and just sort of pondered my life. I've never been, and I'm going to tell you, there were times when they would come in, someone would come in, it might be a hospital advocate, you know, an advocate, the hospital has advocates that work for you, or that one does. And people would come in and they would assume that I was dying. And they would ask me about what current home health care I had. And I would say, well, none. And it would be, well, do you not have someone who comes in and helps you bathe? Is there someone who comes and helps clean? Is there someone who gets groceries for you or maybe prepares a meal? I mean, they're asking all these questions. Do you have a wheelchair at home? Do you have, it's, what do you need? What do you need? And I'm going, you don't understand. I'm okay. Read, I'm okay. And even the nurses, they must have pricked my fingers on this hand a couple of times a day, maybe more than that. I don't remember. What I do know is they did a lot of stuff to me while I was in there, and the only thing I feel any repercussions from today are all of the needle pricks in my fingers where they were convinced I was diabetic. And of course, I'm not. But I belong to something called Follow My Health with the Baptist Healthcare System here in Pensacola. And everything I do, medical-wise, my doctors, flu shots, all that stuff, it's an app on my phone called Follow My Health, and everything they do in the Baptist system is posted to that. And as soon as they do it, it's put in the system, like immediately. They dictate it and it's put in. I don't care what it is. And so my phone, which is constantly dinging, saying, you have a new update to follow your health. You have a new update to follow your health. I mean, there is no telling. This is it. You have an important update regarding your health from Baptist Healthcare. Please sign in, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's just pages of these. Pages of where they're posting to that. So, I mean, I can go read everything, and it's just exactly the way that original hospital doctor said. Everything you see, that's all it's going to talk about. And what is really funny is yesterday, middle of the day, my phone rings. And this Baptist has their own area code, and they tell you that, if we call you, it's us because of the area code. So my phone rang and it was that area code, and I answered it, and it was this really nice young man, and he introduced himself and told me that he was with the congestive heart failure, department, whatever, from Baptist, and that he knew that I had been a recent patient there and I was seen for congestive heart failure, and he wanted me to know that they had a support group, that if I felt up to it, if I wanted to join and be a part of, he could make that happen. And I told Jim after I hung up the phone, by then I'm not real happy that everybody's talking about this, or saying this is what's wrong with me. Not that there's anything wrong, but that's not what's wrong with me. And I said, but I managed to be nice to him, and I told him, and I did say to him, I said, may I ask if you have access to my records, which I'm sure you do. And he said, I do. And I said, if you'll go back and look, and I gave him the date, I said, this all started with a kidney stone. And it was just sort of, as my doctor described, the perfect storm. And he went, oh, I'm so sorry. He said, I'm so sorry. And he was very apologetic. But it's almost like I can't get away from it. But I came home with, they gave me an option of coming home with a Lasix pill and a potassium pill. And they said, you decide whether or not you want to have the prescription filled. He's sort of shaking his head like this. But he said, if you feel like maybe you've gained a couple of pounds for no reason, he said, just take one. And take a potassium too, because it's going to deplete your body of potassium. So, but he said, if you choose not to have that prescription filled, don't do it. Don't do it. You don't need it. So yesterday was a wonderful day. I heard from my kids and my grandkids, and we FaceTimed, and I had gifts and I had cards. And I had Jim take a picture of my arms last night. They're actually starting to look better last night, but I have wounds to show for it. And Jim asked me what I wanted for dinner, for my birthday dinner, and not hungry, but y'all know Jim is the cook, and Jim makes, oh my God, Jim makes the best twice baked potatoes. And then we have these great big scallop shells that are about that big that we've had for years. And he doesn't put the potato back in the potato shell after he scoops it out and mixes everything. He piles that potato up on top of that scallop shell, and they have cheese, and he puts them back in the oven, and they're so creamy when you eat them. They just melt in your mouth. So I said, you know what? I want a twice baked potato and a salad. And that was my birthday dinner. And then of course he had been to the grocery store, so he brought me cake or tiramisu. We had tiramisu. And that was my birthday. Mick Jagger, Mick and I share our 83rd birthday, July 27th, 1943. If you've stayed with me, thank you. I probably wouldn't have, but I'm going to get this video up as quick as I can, and then I'm going to take a few days. I may have a video this weekend. I may not. I made a promise to myself to really take some time and rest. Even though we're retired a lot of times, we're just so busy. We're on the go. We go and we do and we run and we're doing this and we're doing that and I just want to regroup. I want to recoup. I want to make sure that I've put this behind me, because trust me, it was scary. It was scary. Even though my brain knew, everything on the outside was telling me something else. So, as I said, I would love to do some kind of volunteer work for this hospital. They did there's some noise outside, I'm sorry. this hospital is different. It is like the technology behind it, and it's not just the technology, it's the people. An older cardiologist, in fact, he was my cardiologist colleague, one of his partners. He came by to see me, and I told him, I said, every single person that I come in contact with, I don't care whether they came in to clean the room. I don't care who they were. They spoke to me with a very soft, kind voice. And I don't understand how this happened. How this could be this way. How any place could be this way. And he said, Miss Bailey, he said, this hospital is as high-tech as they come. He said, people don't realize what's here. It's only 2 years old. It's only been open 2 years. And the other one had been here for probably 100 years. I don't know. It was huge. It was old. It was, downtown. And I've forgotten what this cost. And it's not a huge hospital. I think it's only 264 beds. But he said, we have all of this high-tech equipment. It is the best you can get, the latest in technology. He said, you've already seen everything is on the computer. Everything. And we nurse we do everything. We nurse different. We do everything different. And he said, how can we have a hospital of that caliber and not have the people that go along with it? Which makes sense. So, it's just a reminder to be kind. Be kind to yourself. Take care of yourself. Don't take any chances with your health, for sure. Thank you for sticking in there with me. Know that I love you, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.